Oh yes, this is my new look. Before we jump into this review, I'd like to quickly explain that I've played this game both on PlayStation 2 as well as on PC. Also, mind you, we're talking about Star Wars Battlefront that was released in 2005, not the remake that DICE made and released in 2017 that EA has their money-grubbing fingers on. This review is going to focus mainly on Star Wars Battlefront 2 and my experiences with it on Steam. As you can see, I have experience playing it on Star Wars Battlefront 2 on PlayStation 2, but I'm going to emphasize this review and focus on my experiences through playing it through Steam. The elements will sometimes carry over between various consoles, but just know that's the narrative that I've taken with this review.
Star Wars Battlefront II Classic 2005, as it is now labeled on Steam, was developed by Pandemic Studios and released November 1st, 2005. Pandemic is also the developer for Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Battlefront 1. Actually, all three games share the same in-house engine. If you're wondering what Pandemic is doing right now, don't bother. They were shut down in 2009 by EA. You know, it's kind of amazing just how far-reaching massive video game giants reach. It just seems more creepy and corrupting when it's concerning EA and Microsoft, but really, Blizzard, Sony, and Nintendo all do it too. Anyway,
short-lived Pandemic was, but developed several good games, they did. Battlefront 2, my favorite it was.
The story aspect of Star Wars Battlefront 2 comes from its campaign, where you play as a clone trooper from the 501st Legion. The campaign technically starts with the Battle of Magito, but if you play the tutorial, you get one more snippet of story and the game mechanics explained to you from the Battle of Geonosis, the proper starting place, in my opinion. The first part of the campaign, titled Fall of the Old Republic, takes place 22 years before the Battle of Yavin, running all the way through to the end of the prequels. The second part of the campaign, titled Rise of the Empire, takes place 18 years before the Battle of Yavin and ends 3 years after the Battle of Yavin, on the best freaking level in Star Wars Battlefront 2, Hoth. So I really loved the narrative that the developers went for Star Wars Battlefront 2. Everything is given from the perspective of the clone troopers, even after the Battle of Yavin. That does raise a bit of a problem though. If you're aware of the Star Wars canon, you'll remember that the clone army was raised so quickly because of tampering with the clones' genetics, forcing them to age more quickly. I haven't really gotten around to watching Star Wars Rebels yet, but apparently the aging process is explained a bit there. Naturally, I default to Karen Travis's book series, though they are no longer in canon. It was a bit tough to dig up, but the closest I can find to when the order was placed for the clone army took place between 41 and 36 BBY, or before the Battle of Yavin. To put it in perspective from the Star Wars Episode 2 movie, in simply 5 years, the clones looked like they were fully developed 10-year-olds. In the words of Prime Minister of Kamino, Lama Su,
"Oh yes, it's essential. Otherwise a mature clone would take a lifetime to grow. Now we can do it in half the time."
And that's the problem. The clones are all young men. They look like they're in their prime at the Battle of Geonosis. So what, should we guess that they're 20, 30 years old? In 10 years, they would be in their 40s and 50s, all ready to start complaining about aching bones in retirement. Thanks to the Clone Wars animated series, we know there's a regular amount of clone troopers still being incubated and developed for the Grand Army of the Republic. But by the time of Rise of the Empire, the cloning process should have been halted and the roles are slowly being turned over to humanoid recruits. More specifically, there are probably few to no clones still alive from that first Battle of Geonosis, for upsettingly obvious reasons. I don't know, it just bothers me to think that some clones are still running around on the Death Star. But I guess from the time that the Republic falls to the Battle of Yavin, some clones must have still been hanging around. Oh wait, I get it! The reason I object so much is because the clone troopers all have Tamora Morrison's voice, or Jango Fett if you prefer. But stormtroopers never sound like clone troopers, mostly because when the movies came out, they were just assumed to be like army recruits, not a copy-paste job of a Mandalorian bounty hunter. And even in the game, the voices of the stormtroopers are that of, well, stormtroopers, not clones. So there's a bit of a continuity error going on there. But I've spent more than enough time complaining about smaller details. To recap what I'm complaining about, I don't like that the story narrative continues with the 501st in the rise of the Empire and continues to be narrated by a clone trooper. It would make much more sense if the clone trooper sounded super old or someone else took over for the narrative. Let's move on to gameplay. I normally would say, let's cover quickly over the controls, but there's no real quick way to cover this part of the game. Yes, you can control everything with a keyboard and mouse nicely. And yes, you can play with a controller nicely. But depending on the game mode, if you're in a vehicle, if you're in a space battle, and if you actually own a joystick and you're a picky flyer, there might just be a bit going on.
I specifically keep this old dusty thing around just because there are still a few games that you need to play these with. Like, I wouldn't imagine trying to play X-Wing Alliance or TIE Fighter or anything without a joystick. Sometimes it even comes in handy for games like this.
So typically, on the ground you'll probably want to use a controller or good old WASD to move around. Something you might notice about my gameplay footage is that I really like playing in first-person view. You can toggle between first and third-person views in your settings. I would love to sing the praises of first-person mode, but really it's a suboptimal way to play. I remember my first time joining a multiplayer game and being killed before I ever saw anyone. That happened often, actually. That's because you get to see so much more when you're playing in third person. It's one of those all or nothing scenarios. Either everyone should be locked into first person or third person. Given the choice, the third person view has a tactical advantage, just from the increased volume of vision size, but also because a third-person camera can let someone peek around the corners without being seen. Now that's not to say first person doesn't have anything nice about it. When you aim down your sights, in third person you just get an over-the-shoulder view. But in first-person mode, you get a zoomed-in blaster scope or some type of crosshairs. It definitely increases accuracy, but too little too late, because on almost every map, everyone will see you before you have the chance to fire a shot in retaliation. Let's quickly explain the user interface before we continue with my boring lecture on basic controls. So at the top of the screen, you have your target's health. Blue is friendly and red is enemy. That's how colors work! The blue number at the top is your reinforcements. If you die, that number ticks down by 1. If your compadre dies, that number ticks down by 1. This is how the team game works, guys. Everyone's in it together. Even if it's that one stupid NPC at the bottom of the stats screen who did literally nothing except eat extra lives for the whole game. Next, you have your primary and secondary weapons, located in the lower left corner of the screen, along with their respective quantities of ammunition. Oh, an additional helpful hint is to keep an eye on your crosshair reticule thing in the center of the screen. Not because that's where your shots are going to be placed, but because it also provides feedback for how many rounds in a clip, or how close your weapon is to overheating. There's actually a lot of different types of weapons and vehicles to choose from when playing Star Wars Battlefront II. Generally speaking, if it uses ammo, you'll have an ammo clip, and if it uses energy, it can overheat if you fire it too fast. If you want to watch that stupid NPC die a few hundred times, go ahead and watch the feed to the top left corner of the screen. And you will lastly notice the two bars in the bottom left corner of the screen. The bigger bar is your health. Its color is reflected by the quality it has. Red means you're almost dead, blue means you're full health. Some classes can heal themselves, like the smuggler engineer classes. The rest of us need to go find a medical droid to heal up, and if you're running low on ammo, find a gonk droid. Typically, medical and gonk droids are located near control points. The final bar is your stamina bar. You use up stamina by running, jumping, and rolling. You can sometimes execute a roll right before your stamina runs out, but then you go into negative stamina and need to wait for it to become positive again before using any stamina-related abilities. Some heroes use stamina for special abilities and special powers, like flying around as any Jedi because of your seemingly limitless force leap abilities. But don't worry, groundwalkers! There are a few classes with jetpacks. These have their own special energy bar to count down, so jet troopers and shock troopers don't wreak havoc on their own stamina when trying to move around. This means they're super powerful in several ways, and you'd probably like playing as these characters. A lot of the fun in Star Wars Battlefront 2 is figuring out which classes you like to play as, which faction you want to play as, and getting to know each hero, and playing several hundred battles on Hoth, because I just can't get enough of that snow apparently. So there are 3 control settings, not options or layouts, mind you. If you need or want to rebind your keyboard settings, there are 3 category tabs to rebind at: on foot, in a vehicle, and flying. So far we've just explained moving around on foot in first or third person views. Vehicles are pretty straightforward normally. Sometimes there are those weird people who like to invert X, Y, or Z axes. And there's still flying around in space battles. I personally dislike the keyboard controls when it comes to starfighter or troop transport flying. I have a background of playing flight simulators and ace combat games. I don't like feeling sluggish or slow to respond when piloting. Thankfully, with a joystick or controller, I feel pretty good about the space combat missions. It's not as good as TIE Fighter or X-Wing Alliance, but we're not really comparing apples to apples. Star Wars Battlefront 2 plays better as a first-person or third-person shooter than it does as a dogfighter. However, let me quickly say that I still liked it. It's just not as well polished as I would like it to be. Now that you know how to play, well, as best as I can prepare you, let's talk about where to play. There are 2 main choices for gameplay. Do you want to play against computers or against other humans? Actually, the multiplayer was lost for a little bit when GameSpy was shut down in 2014. There were ways to join and host private servers, but multiplayer support came back October 2nd, 2017. Honestly, it was and is a big deal to most of us who loved Star Wars Battlefront 2. But regarding single player, you have 3 game modes. Campaign, where you play as a member of the 501st, and have a mix of goals and objectives. So it's not just team deathmatch or capture the control point. Each mission typically has a bit of each goal, and sometimes a playable hero. Next, Galactic Conquest, which has a bit of a strategy, galaxy, overworld, strategic view, the board game Risk feel to it. And lastly, Instant Action, my preferred game mode, where I choose where I want to play and the map mode I want, and click play. So basically Hoth on XL battle mode. It doesn't even matter if I win or lose, I still have a good time. In multiplayer, you have the options you'd expect to have. You can jump into games or host your own. You do have a buddies list, but I do remember my brother and I having trouble trying to add each other. But you can coordinate with friends to join existing games. I've already ranted enough about the campaign, so let's just cover the basics and move on. The campaign royally ruined my kill-death ratio. I know it doesn't matter, but as everyone should know by now, I'm an overachiever who really wants to reach perfection, but I'm trapped in a body and mind which can never be perfect. The campaign forces you to play very aggressively and sometimes get quite creative when trying to squeeze victories out over your foes. The games are no longer simple control point team death matches. Typically, in a mission, you're going to have several different objectives, be it to capture and return an object, switch to a specific class and accomplish a task or objective, play as a hero and get to a certain number of kills, or hunt down and kill specific targets on the battlefield. The campaign follows the, quote, story, unquote, of the Clone Wars. Most of the story has been retroactively changed because of the Disney acquisition of the Star Wars IP. Following the clone troopers from the Battle of Geonosis against the Separatists to the rise of the Empire and the final confrontation on Hoth. I don't know why they stopped there. Maybe they ran out of space on the disc, or maybe it's because you can't top the Battle of Hoth when it comes to telling the Star Wars original trilogy from the perspective of the Empire. Regardless, the campaign will definitely surprise you, keep you interested, tank your kill-death ratio, but otherwise it's definitely worth playing through at least once or twice. Moving on to the next game mode, Galactic Conquest. So yeah, think of the board game Risk. The game starts out with this galactic map view. You unlock character classes, buy fleets, or get bonuses you can use in fights, and then you move your fleets around defending and attacking various planets. If it's fleet versus fleet, you play a space battle. If you invade or attempt to conquer a planet, then you play a planet battle. The game modes are the same, you just don't have the same level of control over which area you're going to fight on. If you don't have any favorite levels, this could easily be one of the best choices to play in the game. But I'm too biased on where I like to play. Also, brace yourself. Galactic Conquest tends to be a pretty long game mode. Thankfully, you can save mid-conquest. Also, it's very customizable, so you can have some control over how long the game is going to play through and which mode you're going to be playing in. Instant action. In my opinion, this is where the fun's at. Here, you get to choose between any planet and any mode on that planet, and even play some of the more bizarre game modes like Hunt or Hero Assault. First, let's cover the obvious ones. The default game mode, Conquest. While playing a conquest map, it's a team deathmatch or capture all the control points type of game. You can win by killing off all enemy reinforcements or capturing all of the control points. If your enemy doesn't have any control points, they can't respawn. It's as simple as that. By the way, you can also adjust your settings for kill limit, time limit, heroes or no heroes in your settings for instant action. If you were to decide to sit on the sidelines for the whole game, you might notice something about the different maps. And even then, sometimes if you're participating in the game, on certain maps, you might almost always lose, regardless of how well you do. This happens because certain maps are already tilted to one side or the other. You can take this as a challenge to try to be the one-man army who turns the tide of war. Or you can shrug it off as just playing against AI designed for the PlayStation 2. We haven't even touched heroes yet. On each map, there's a special character called a hero, which will normally be unlocked if you're playing well. The hero characters are key characters in the Star Wars universe. Luke Skywalker on Hoth, Mace Windu on Geonosis, Yoda on Dagobah, Darth Maul on Yavin 4. Wait a minute, what's he doing here? I guess canonical liberties were taken. But I guess who else would the CIS get on Yavin 4 if they fought on Yavin 4? Heroes control like standard play with good old WASD movement. But instead of health, they have a lightsaber which will grow or shrink depending on how many kills you're getting. If you get a hero and sit in the corner without getting any kills, the lightsaber will slowly tick down until you die. If you go on a mad killing spree, the lightsaber will grow and you'll get to keep your hero longer. I personally don't like having heroes on in my games because they feel overpowered and completely useless. Hey, you try jumping in the middle of a raging battle as Han Solo. At least as Leia Organa, you have a short invulnerability shield. Maybe I'm just not playing them right, but I prefer getting awards for playing as each class. Also, only players get to play as heroes. I would love to suddenly freak out as an NPC is chasing me down as a hero. That would be so fun. Maybe NPCs aren't allowed to become heroes because the game was originally designed with online play in mind. Speaking of awards, that's the final thing we're going to talk about in this review. Awards. The simple explanation is, if you do well, blue text will pop up in the top left corner of the screen and you'll get a small bonus. Say you get 12 kills with a blaster rifle in 1 life. Light blue text saying, "Frenzy!" appears, and you think, huh, cool? What happened? If you switch weapons really quick and return to your blaster rifle, you will notice it is now an award blaster rifle. But wait, there's a complication. You might not get the award blaster rifle if you've just started playing Star Wars Battlefront II, because the game tracks how many times you've earned awards throughout the game. When playing single player offline or split screen, until you've earned Frenzy 4 or more times, you don't get any upgrades. Not sure why, maybe for replay value. These award levels are called ranks. 0 to 3 is considered green. 4 to 31 is considered veteran. And this is when you receive regular upgrades. 32 to 63 is considered elite, and you receive the award at reduced requirements. Lastly, at 64 and on, your rank is considered legendary, and you receive the perk or upgrade automatically. Whew! That's the problem with reviewing games I know a lot about or care very much about. I have a lot to say and try not to leave details out. Hopefully it wasn't too overwhelming. I do err on the side of exhaustive guide rather than review when it comes to Atratzu Reviews. To a quick... Hey, the review's over. Who cares? Am I right? High five! I've been stumbling over my entire words this entire review, and I've also been doing it all week and mixing words backwards and forwards. It's amazing that I can even English at all, just saying. But to quickly recap, the story was satisfactory, the offline instant action mode is my favorite. As long as there's a community for Star Wars Battlefront II, the multiplayer should stick around. The gameplay is as easy or hard as you want it to be. Remember to play how you want offline, but online, third person is probably the requirement. Joysticks sold separately, and a partridge in a pear tree. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more Atratzu content. See you next time.
You will subscribe for more Atratzu related content. You will subscribe for more Atratzu related content. You will subscribe for more Atratzu related content.